The first time I killed, it was out of necessity. Backed into a corner, my opponent obviously more powerful and threatening than I could ever be. I did what I had to do. The warrior's cries about his dead son, how we would be joining him soon, drowned out the whir of my sling as I launched the last stone that ended his life. The second time I killed, it was out of spite. I had been running, been hiding for what felt like an eternity, and then I had the power to fight back, and I would make them pay. It only became easier after that. Hi, this is Tony, and welcome to Critically Lit. Today I'll be reviewing A Plague Tale: Innocence, a stealth adventure game developed by Asobo Studios and published by Focus Home Interactive. When I sat down to write this review, my head was filled with all these wonderful ideas. I would bring up the perfectly touching depiction of the relationship between our young protagonist Amicia and her even younger brother Hugo. And I would talk about the moments of quiet humanity, woven skillfully between the hungry darkness of heart-pounding stealth scenes and the surprising horror of chattering, slavering rats just beyond the torchlight. And then I finished the game, and my words fled. It took me longer than I care to admit to figure out exactly what I wanted to say about this game, and I spent days agonizing over my words, just trying to figure out the right way to impart the sensation of playing it, to make you feel even just a fraction of what Plague Tale is going to make you feel. And I'm still not sure I can do it justice. Because A Plague Tale: Innocence is the most beautifully woven story in a video game that I have ever seen. Throughout the game, we control Amicia, daughter of the Darun family. Amicia's brother, Hugo, is infected by some sort of mystical disease, and the Catholic Inquisition wants to capture him because of that fact. Now, Amicia and Hugo are on the run, through the villages and countryside of a 14th century France, struck by a mysterious plague known as the Bite. And that's all the motivation you need to set the events of A Plague Tale in motion. The gameplay itself is fairly straightforward but fun. It is, first and foremost, a stealth game, with a little bit of third-person action and some straightforward puzzles to solve. Your primary weapon is Amicia's sling, and the alchemical concoctions that you pick up along the way, all of which are fun to experiment with. But most of your time will be spent sneaking behind cover and finding ways to distract or incapacitate guards. But the gameplay is just a vehicle for what makes the game truly shine: the characters, the story, the music, and the world. Amicia herself is everything you could ever want in a protagonist: smart, charming, brave, but also vulnerable and flawed. And Hugo is perfectly innocent, a child in every sense of the word. Though it's never explicitly stated, Amicia appears to be somewhere between 14 and 16 years old. And while so many stories find it difficult to bring children to life in the eyes of their audience, the writers for Plague Tale have created one of the most compelling young protagonists to date. Through the exquisite combination of voice acting and script, you can feel Amicia's fear bubbling to the surface with each careful step as she narrowly dodges the Inquisition. And you can tell that so much of her bravery, at least in the beginning, is a front. A facade she tries to keep up for her little brother while they face the horrors of a slightly magical 14th century France. Amicia's relationship with Hugo is a highlight of the game, and plays into the mechanics as well. While stealthing your way through the endless patrols set by the Inquisition, you'll have to choose whether to leave Hugo in place or bring him with you, potentially slowing you down. And later on, Hugo opens up some very interesting mechanics, but I'm not going to give those away here. Asobo's depiction of 14th century France is so lovingly crafted that it feels genuine from your first few seconds of exposure. It is a world of famine and war and plague, one where entire villages have lost their mind from fear and grief, where battlefields are strewn with endless corpses rotting in the open air. But it's also a world of idyllic beauty, where those spots that humans have yet to settle, the humming riverways and breathing forests, call back to a time before human intervention, where stillness is a virtue and gives us the rare ability to step away from our chaos and reflect. There is a moment, after having escaped a plague-filled farm with the bodies of slaughtered pigs piled high and diseased rats bursting from the ground, where our two protagonists enjoy a brief moment of peace. Walking along a river, away from the plague and the Inquisition, Amicia trails behind with their new companion Lucas, while Hugo runs ahead chasing frogs. And it is sublime. For all the death around them, there is still wonder and joy left in the world. Something to cherish in the relationship between a sister and her brother. I would say that it's moments like these that give Plague Tale its humanity. Short periods of time that end all too soon, where you are able to rest and recuperate from the trauma of your experience. But unfortunately, there are darker moments that are all too human as well. Early into the game, Hugo and Amicia find themselves in a village beset by the plague. With no understanding of what's happening, with death and sickness all around them, the villagers turn to the strong and the brutal to lead them. And it's all so keenly sad and vicious and real all at once. And even in these tense moments, where you're running for your life, your little brother in tow, everything still feels all too human. Even the elements of magic and mysticism that exist feel as if they truly belong in a Plague Tale, with an often alluded to but never fully explored lore existing behind the alchemy that substitutes for magic. But we haven't even addressed one of the most standout elements of the game: the rats. This plague, the bite as it's called, is spread by the bites of swarming, seething rats that devour everything in their path. Even those lucky enough to only be bitten have only a horrible death awaiting them as their bodies burst into sores and boils. The rats serve as a central plot point that makes both more and less sense as the game goes on. Some of your interactions with the frightening little rodents evolve. There will be moments where you say to yourself, "What the hell is going on?" And then you'll quickly move past that and accept it because it somehow all still fits together. The rats are never fully explained, but that's part of what makes them so interesting. They are a force of nature, burrowing through wood and stone, devouring flesh. But I'll leave you to uncover the full mystery of the plague for yourself. Perhaps one of the most surprising and immersive elements are the little bits of dialogue that occur outside of the cutscenes, the times where you still have control of Amicia, and still her character says and reacts in such a realistic manner to the world around her. It's a tribute to the script that these things never take you out of the experience. They only ever serve to enhance it. The game also cleverly uses the absolutely stunning soundtrack to punctuate those moments. The instruments always pick up at exactly the right time to enhance the mood, whether cheerful or more frequently sorrowful or tense. The pounding of drums or the trickle of a mandolin or the morose, haunting strings. All of them are live performances and add to the atmosphere in such a subtle way. And then at times they take over to drive home the emotional aspects of certain scenes. The game weaves together these elements so powerfully that it's hard not to identify with Amicia and her struggles. For the first part of the game, you will feel so intensely persecuted and weak. You will feel that stealth isn't so much a game anymore, and more a matter of survival. But amid the horror and death, there is always the relationship between Amicia and her little brother. Between Amicia and the new friends that she makes during her journey. And every last one of these relationships will feel fleshed out and important and touching in their own individual ways. This cohesion between script, acting, story, music, and sound design is so complete, so sublime, that it's hard to believe that it wasn't all put together by a single visionary in some act of creative madness. If I could sum things up, I would say this. A Plague Tale: Innocence is less of a game and more of a young adult novel. Perhaps one of the best that you'll ever experience. Filled with drama and love and horror, all mediated through the eyes of children doing their best to overcome the extraordinary circumstances they find themselves in. And like any good story, things don't always go the way you want them to. There are many heartbreaking scenes, and the closer you get to the end, the more you will have sacrificed before things come to a close. In the end, I'm glad I picked this game up, and I'm saddened that I eventually had to put it down. But for now, I'm just happy that I was there with Amicia, while she had a chance to breathe, and for a moment put the horrors she had to experience behind her. And I'm happy that I got to watch the two siblings make new friends and companions that would help them in their journey. I'm happy that I was there, while both of us watched Hugo forget that he was sick, and that death would visit us again sooner rather than later, while he ran ahead and chased frogs. This has been Tony with Critically Lit, and thank you guys for watching.
Aren't you cold?
A little, yes.
Hugo doesn't seem to mind.
He's keeping himself warm.
Yes. but he's too far for my liking.